there's a little tool I use in my breakout. I give everybody a little bouncy ball. There's a lesson in the bouncy ball. Sometimes it comes back faster than you sent it. Sometimes it comes back higher than you sent it. Sometimes it comes at a different trajectory than you sent it, but it always bounces back. So you pick up your ball and remind yourself that you can always bounce back.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Heart Inspired, the show dedicated to highlighting individuals in their pursuit of authentic leadership. We peel back the layers to uncover the roadblocks we all face, explore the actions we can take, and how to persevere towards the best version of ourselves. It is my hope that you'll be inspired by their story and gain some insights to help you in your own journey. Today's guest, Rufus Stephens, is the author of Life Lessons from Miss Mattie and Leave a Mark that he co-authored with his daughter. He is a former business owner, corporate executive, and an ordained minister. Mr. Stephens has always had a passion for public speaking, lending his voice to eager ears for over 25 years. In 2015, Mr. Stephens formed a motivational speaking company called Raisin the Rufe Communications. Please welcome my guest, Rufus Stephens. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My guest is amazing. I'm looking forward to hearing more about his successes and his view on resilience, as this is part of the Resilience series. Rufus, thank you so much for being part of the show today.
Thank you, Michelle.
Glad to have you here. When we first met, and now we're completely friends, everyone who's listening,
That's right.
But when we first met, I had a smile ear to ear just listening to you and your message and what you've been doing and your career path. But right now you have a speaking company where you're really sharing your message for those who are eager to listen. And so for today's audience, I want to turn it over to you and let's talk about some of the messaging you do and your view on resilience and what we should be focusing on.
Well, thank you first, Michelle, for the opportunity to be with you today. I am like so many people are, and I think everybody should be. I am living my passion right now. I love making people feel better. That just came to me one day, probably 25 years ago, and I remember saying something nice to somebody, which was true, and how they responded to it. And this was an accomplished person. I thought it would have brushed it off, but they ate it up. And I'm saying, people need to hear. People need their chins raised from time to time because, we walk around with this facade like everything's well and nothing could be further from the truth. And so I started speaking, going all the way back to Toastmasters in Chicago. And then it became clear at some point in time, it becomes clear to you that you've been gifted. And because you live so close to it, you don't see it as a gift. You just see it as something you do. My mother was a wordsmith. I love words, and that plays well for me. And then I started contesting, entering all sorts of contests in Chicago for Toastmasters and winning and competing in other states and that kind of thing. And it just said, hey, listen, this is something you ought to do. I was later called into the ministry. And, so often, very often in church, you're speaking, though it's Christian-centered, but everything about it is lifting downturned heads and encouragement and everything about that. So in May of 2015, I started a business called Raisin the Rufe Communications. Rufe meaning a play on my name, Rufus, R-U-F-E, because people get it wrong and they try to spell the right roof and then they don't pull up the website.
You need to trademark that. That is so clever. I love that.
Well, thank you. What I didn't tell you, that going all the way back to Toastmasters, I was doing well, and then your life runs at you. And then so my wife passed away. And this is somebody we had been best friends since 10th grade. And she laid to rest on our anniversary. And it just kind of took the oomph out of me for a while.
Yeah.
And then I remarried some years later and recognized that speaking was what I wanted to do. And then I started Raisin the Rufe Communications and started speaking and moved then from Illinois to North Carolina, made some contact with people who could help me. It's said that associated with people who are already successful at what it is you want to do, and they will help you move forward. And that's exactly what happened. I started getting speaking gigs and started speaking nationally. And we have since moved down to Florida. But the passion is to go into a room that doesn't know you. I remember speaking in San Diego at the Marriott in a room with 300 people, and I think only 3 knew me.
Wow.
and when I came out of there, I got a standing ovation. And when I came out of there, there was an exhibit the next day, and these people would be visiting the exhibit. 5 of the people happened to come by, and they said, "There's Rufus." They started chanting, "Rufus, Rufus," on the exhibit
Wow, you
floor.
became a celebrity overnight.
All I was doing is doing what I was being paid for, and
Awesome.
it brought dividends. And so it just, what it does for any speaker, it just reinforces that you were here for this. We get all sorts of reinforcement, and we need to own it. So
Yeah.
that's why I'm now, I branch it off into workshop. I have a workshop called Embracing Change and another one called Avoiding Procrastination. And those, depending on what my client wants to do, those will be a part of the keynote, which is always, for the most part, embracing change. I'm working on another one called Leave a Mark. But that's kind of where we are right now, refocusing now, coming out of pandemic and all that kind of stuff.
When the pandemic hit, those of us who either pivoted or continued to move forward and create some positivity, we dealt with a lot of resilience over the last 3 years. And we deal with resilience throughout our lives, obviously. But what are some of the messages or things that you really focus on when you're doing a keynote when it comes to being resilient or being open to change, like you mentioned?
Well, I think, and this was a challenging time for all of us. But when I look at it, it was amazing because it was a worldwide phenomenon. But
Yeah.
more locally to me, we've always had challenges. Well, I was raised in a family, 5 children, single mom, and a grandmom who helped to keep the homestead while our mother went out and taught. We were always having adverse circumstances.
Yeah.
And so what I've come away with, and I included in my message, that we are far more resilient than the situations that confront us. We're always better than the stuff that gets in our way. And sometimes you have to be reminded of that, because we give it strength because we worry and we see it as a conqueror over us, and we don't see us as ourselves, moving past us. Before we got on today, I was listening to Hoda and Jenna on the Today Show, and they had Steve Harvey on there. He was quoting a quote from Tom Hanks. He said, "This is what I would tell young people," and I think it applies to everybody, that this too shall pass.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, I don't care. It didn't come to stay, it came to pass. And we need to remember that.
Oh, that's so brilliant. It didn't come to stay, it came to pass. I am naturally, I don't know if I'm naturally, but that's the story I tell myself. I'm naturally wired to worry. I have the what if game playing in my head more often than not. Mm-hmm. And then I look back and go, well, clearly I was wrong about X, Y, and Z. So now I've tried to shift myself and go, okay, you can have that conversation of worry, but you don't have to stay there, because this too shall pass. Really.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because one of the biggest tools, I think, in our arsenal that we don't realize we have is retrospection.
Yeah.
Looking back. You remember that time when you were so scared and you were sucking your thumb and you went to curl up in a fetal position and pray it went away? It went away.
Yeah.
It went away, and you were better. You're still standing. Yeah,
Yes.
it'd be wondering thing if you could talk to this devastation that it did to your body or mind, but you're standing, you're whole, you're ready for the next event. And
I think the world events that have hit us 1-2 punch, or even locally in our country 1-2 punch, whether it be, weather, natural disasters that have hit our South tremendously, or, some of the terrorism that's hit our country and the world. When we're in it, it feels like it will never come out. And time again, we have seen that we come out, and we come out stronger. Now, life is a little bit different. Policies have changed, but then we get used to that. And then it's like, okay, we're ready for the next wave.
That's right. Well, you get it, and I think that's the insidiousness of of bad stuff, it makes you believe sometimes you're the only one who's going through that.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody can understand your woes and everything. And the point of fact is that, millions have gone through that.
Exactly. And sometimes we have to remember that, our woes may not be as bad as somebody else's woes.
Oh my God, yes.
During COVID, I was impacted. My career that I had for X amount of years was over. In my head, it was over. I could have done something else, but nobody else was going through what I went through. Nobody else experienced it. And meanwhile, millions of people were experiencing it. Companies were closing left, right, and center. And,
Yep.
did they have to pivot and change? But yeah, when we're in it, we don't think of it as anybody else is going through that as
Yeah.
well.
We have to encourage ourselves and just remind it. And that's why it's nice to have at least one person who will quote you the truth.
Yeah.
And lead with their heart, but tell you the truth.
So during any of your keynotes, and I'm sure you've done with large audiences and perhaps smaller ones, is there any one person or group of people? I mean, you had your cheerleading group, obviously, that you just mentioned, but was there any one person or persons who stood out so much and your message was so impactful for them, it was like life-changing, that they shared that with you?
Well, two people come to mind, and it's interesting. I have one lady that we spoke to. It wasn't a nursing home. It was a small group. And as a matter of fact, she was the director. So I was speaking to everybody else, but she was in the room. And probably 2 weeks after we had spoken, she wrote a long letter and said that what you said caused me to go back to school. This is somebody who was in her late 40s, early 50s. And I'm going back to college because of what you said. And that was exciting because, you don't just, if you're like me and you don't just stand up just to quote somebody and have everybody laughing or giggle or something. I want paradigm shifts. I want people to move from A to B and be glad for having made the move. And then in another situation, this one was just that I felt that I had done what I was supposed to do. I was asked to speak in Tampa, Florida, to the Florida School Nutrition Association. And the irony of it is that the lady who suggested that I be chosen was somebody that I had met in another life as a corporate sales guy.
Oh, wow.
And, I didn't even know she was going to be at the conference, but she said, let's get Rufus. And so I was hired and everything else. And after I got done, she came up and she said, she simply opened her long arms and she came walking. She said, Rufus, I love you. She said, you made me cry and you made me laugh. And but you changed this room. And that's what I want to hear. That's why I have surveys afterward. I want to change a room. I want you to go from not knowing me to never forgetting the guy on Raisin the Rufe. Because what I did was I brought value to life. I had brought serious content. And so I've had several people who've come up afterwards and say, I still, there's a little tool I use in my breakout, and I give everybody a little bouncy ball. And so I said, well, get used to it, bouncy ball. It's amazing. People anywhere from 40 to 60 become 12 years old when you give them a rubber ball. And they were having so much fun. And I said, but there's a lesson in the bouncy ball. Sometimes it comes back faster than you sent it. Sometimes it comes back higher than you sent it. Sometimes it comes at a different trajectory than you sent it. But it always bounces back. So you put this on the dresser, the nightstand, or whatever, and the next time you blow it or something happens, you pick up your ball and remind yourself that you can always bounce back.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I may have to steal that, Rufus.
I can't tell you. The one I did, I remember it was about 2 PM when I gave them their bouncy ball. 8:30 the next morning when I go online, I got an email from a lady that said, I had to use my ball last night to remind myself that I could bounce back. So so there are people that always feed back and say, listen, you spoke to my situation, or I used what you gave me and it worked.
It reminds me of I did a talk on imposter syndrome, and one of the things that we all have experienced. I mean, mine comes and goes throughout the day, and I just kind of greet it and say, "Oh, you're here, great. Not ready for you," and I say goodbye and pass it along. But we have those stories that we tell ourselves, and when we start to have that track in our heads of the negativity, what are some of the triggers? So for me, I like to vision myself at a beach or a happy place. And it
Yep.
kind of takes me out of that tailspin of negativity.
Mhm.
So I love the bouncy ball. That's really great.
And sometimes, and speakers will tell you this, I think I've heard some say, and I know it's the case with me, sometimes I have to give a speech to me. There's nobody in the room but me, and I speak like there are thousands because
So wait a minute. How are you doing that? Is that because you're on Zoom, or is it
no,
because
no,
you're
no.
just
I'm
doing?
I'm I'm just in my office like I am now, and I'll just start to present because nobody's hearing that but me. But I give it everything I got, like I would on a stage, and I'm
Wow.
better for it. And I'm just telling people that sometimes you can't wait for somebody to encourage you. They may be busy with their stuff, they
Oh yeah.
or
Yeah.
disinterested in yours.
Right,
So
right,
you
right.
you, you got to encourage you. So sometimes you have to just kind of remind yourself that um, I'm good.
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
friends. I remember one time I went online and I would just want to get a feel. So I said, if I mean anything at all to you, just give me one word for what I mean to you. And so in about 2 days, I've got 91 replies, and 60 of them were distinctly different. Some people, the other 30 just kind of repeated what the other 60 said. But it was interesting to look at the 60 because they were different. And that you do bring something to somebody's life that you don't appreciate. I'm just Rufus the nice guy. I tell everybody I'm like the family dog. You don't mess with my
Rub
food.
behind
Stay
the
off.
ears and everybody's happy, right?
Right, right. Don't mess with my food and stay off my tail, and we're good.
I love that. Yeah, because messing with the tail or stealing my food, that could
Oh
create
yeah,
a whole other different
you got
reaction
it.
for sure.
But I'm just easy to get along with, and it was interesting to hear them be so distinct about how I impacted them. And it was very humbling. I would encourage everybody to do that because you take yourself for granted. You live too close to the forest. And so you ask some people to give you a read on who you are in one or two words.
Yeah, that's powerful stuff. So, Rufus, I know you're an author and you have two books that you have authored so far. Let's talk about the first one.
Okay.
What inspired you to write the book to begin with?
I always wanted to write a book. I always felt like I had at least one story in me.
Yep.
And and so I started thinking, and it was fairly easy. The subject matter was fairly easy. It was my mother. My mother was a educator in South Georgia, taught all over Georgia. I see the South Georgia cities like Vidalia and all the different ones. She taught all everywhere. She loved her five children. She and my father separated when I have a twin brother, and when he and I were three, and the oldest was eight, they separated. And my father was an alcoholic, and my mother became a workaholic, and to take care of her five babies. And
Mm.
but she didn't just. It wasn't just necessary for provisions; it was necessary for character building. So every one of them will tell you now that, and she was tough. She had four boys and one girl, and so she couldn't be namby-pamby. So
I know about tough moms.
oh yeah, oh yeah. And so she popped their bottoms when they're 3 and 4. There was no problem getting in their face when they're 19,
Yeah.
um, which she had to do, and we became all the better for it.
Yeah.
And so I started thinking about it. She used to teach, and she would take one or two of us for the school year with her. I probably went more often than any of them. And we had a serious, um, you know, mother-son relationship, very close.
Mm.
And so I started thinking about all, you live so close to stuff, you forget stuff. So I started writing and talking about mother. And I said, so that it's kind of pointed and has some direction, let's talk about life lessons, things I've learned from her, rather than making it biographical. So I chose 8 lessons that we learned from her. And as I started writing, the memories would come back, and the details of the memories would come back, and it became a fairly easy read. And she was a funny person, and I think she gave me a piece of her funny, and it's in the book. And it's a small read, and I intended for it to be small because I wanted to be consumed.
Yeah.
How many books do we have on our bookshelf that we started reading and never finished?
Oh, especially if they're not so great, you really can get bored.
Oh my God! Yes,
they become dust collectors.
Yeah.
Tell us one of the lessons, one of the 7 that really stood out for you that you could share with the.
One of them is that education is non-negotiable. That was a huge. You will go to school, you will go to school, you will go to college. We didn't know how she did it on a little meager salary, but you will go to college, and all 5 of us did, and 3 went to graduate school.
Wow.
The other one I think that I love, she said, laugh regularly. Three that I made. The other one was laugh regularly. My mother always she couldn't just say things easily. Her name was Mattie, and so you said, Mattie, how are you doing today? The normal person would say, fine, thank you. My mother would say, fluttering, still can't fly. No, she said, kicking not too high, fluttering, still can't fly. And so that was her way of saying I'm okay. And so her thing is season your speech. When you talk, don't just say it so that, because if you use words that are nicely colored, people remember those.
Oh yeah.
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 And the other thing was about self-image. We were better than what we had. We were broke. We were poor, and we went to school. I write it in the book that I remember seeing the names of other kids at white schools that had the book for 2 or 3 years, and then when they were going to get new books, we would get their old cast off. But she would say, listen, the information is good, so get what you can get from that book and go on from that. So
wow.
Those are easy lessons. The easy lesson to talk about now, probably when we were younger, they were more challenging to embrace because.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my mother was tough like that too. I mean, some of the lessons, that she shared with us, one of them was more like when we were adults, but if you made a mistake and it was a pretty costly one, whether it be monetarily or not, she would say, oh, that's the tuition of life.
I like that.
And
I love that.
If you keep making that same mistake, eventually you're going to fail the class.
Oh my God. I love that. I love your mom.
And another one that she
Well, I'm telling you right now, I'm stealing that.
Oh, well, you go right ahead. It's the tuition of life,
Right.
So like when you spend money and you shouldn't, and you get a lemon car or something, that was the tuition of life. That was life's lesson. Another one that she shared was, I had an employee who was just unruly, and I had to ask, my mom, who was a coach as well, how do I deal with this, And so she went through a litany of exercises with me. And basically she says, it's really very simple. There's an unwritten contract of how we're supposed to perform in the workplace. And so we haven't stopped paying, but you've stopped performing. So how do we correct that?
Yeah. Well, I like that. I like that. God, yeah. I've been a manager and supervisor. I wish I had known that years ago.
Well, I'll tell you, I learned that. But you know what? She was probably taking the same thing as like when we were kids. If you're home, single mom as well, if you're home, you got jobs. You got things to do.
That's right.
My job is to feed you, clothe you, put a roof over your head, and make sure that you're well taken care of. Your job is X, Y, and Z. And so when there's a break in the contract, we're at an impasse, right?
That's right.
Well, your mother sounds like an amazing woman. And so tell the listeners, what's the name of the book?
The name of the book is um, Life Lessons from Miss Mattie. That's what it looks like.
Oh, we'll make sure we have that in the show
Yeah,
notes.
yeah. It's on Amazon.
Okay,
Okay,
great.
and it's also on Kindle as well.
All right, that sounds great. And so, second book, which I'm really excited about, is one that's pretty special because it's co-authored with your daughter, right?
Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah. So tell
My
us about that one, Leave a Mark, right?
Yes, my baby girl. She is an educator of 17 years and down in Fort Worth, Texas, and is a person who's always wanted to teach. Her mother was a teacher too, and she used to, when she was a little girl, she used to have 25 or 30 imaginary students, and she would shingle all of their work on her bed. And she would bring the bad ones across the hall to me. I was the assistant principal, and so I was supposed to apply discipline. And so
I
the
love the
whole,
role play.
oh yeah, yeah. So the whole context of education was always with her. She went to school, became an educator, and then went back, got a master's in counseling, and that's what she does now. And we just happened to be talking one day, and I happened to mention about developing a speech called "Leave a Mark," and she said, "Boy, that would I love that." She said, and then I got to think. I said, we ought to write a book, "Leave a Mark." I said, but I could not do it without you because it'll be driven by your concept of education and what you know about education, and I can add some people stuff to it. And we just got to writing, and it was interesting how you can talk about something, but somebody has to make a first move. So I did an outline of chapters. This is what it would look like,
Yeah.
and that was the thing that got her moving. And inside of, I don't know, 6 months or 7 months, we developed this book that has 7 marks that teachers can leave on their students, and there's an eighth one to avoid.
Oh, we want to hear about that one.
Well, yeah, well, I'll start with that one. That's the mark of pain.
Oh,
And I used to, and we used real life examples, no names, obviously, of how people can leave marks and painful marks. There was one I was talking about in the book about a teacher that I had in ninth grade. That here I am at the ripe old age as I am today, still talking about it more than 50 years later because it was so indelible. It was
wow.
a negative mark. It's not the mark you want. And then so we talk about marks of empowerment, vision, caring, and it's meant to be. Again, it's a short read. It's probably about 75 or 80 pages, and it's meant for teachers to go through, or people who are young people influencers to go
Hmm.
through and say, hey, listen, I think I'm going to try this technique with my kid. And so we are pushing that. We're developing a workshop that goes, that's not done yet. We're developing a workshop to go to it and a keynote to go along with it. And but it's been exciting because I tell everybody, sometimes you live so close to your kids, you don't realize how smart they are.
Oh, isn't it the
And
truth?
and she is so smart, and she's a daddy's girl, and so we get along famously. And,
That's great.
yeah, and she too is a wordsmith, and so we're having fun with that. We're really pushing marketing that one across the country, and trying to get more and more traction. And if all goes well, before the year is out, we'll have that translated into Spanish and also done into audiobook.
Oh, that'll be amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Audiobook will probably come first. Um,
And are
but
you doing audio in both languages? Excuse me.
that'll probably be the fourth thing to come. That's further down, that's further down there because if it's audio in both language, we won't know what they're saying, and we're the authors. And so,
Yeah, you need a trustworthy advisor on that one for
absolutely,
sure. Yeah.
absolutely, that one's a little
Yeah.
dicey, and so we just
Yeah.
wondered about that. And
Well,
and as you probably know, all Spanish is not created equal.
no, that's for sure. And in Texas, you have a blend of so many Latin American or Latin
Yeah,
communities because you
yeah,
have Mexican and all of the Caribbean and European. I mean,
yeah.
yeah.
Like in Florida, South Florida, same
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Same thing.
that's where we headed. We just got to get there.
What was it like working with your daughter on this project? And is this the first project you've done together?
It is the first project, and our company is called Daddy Daughter Books, and it's the first project, and won't be the last. We're considering another one right now. It was it was nice because we could be totally honest.
Mm.
My kids are honest anyway. It's they kind of kids that, Daddy, you're not going to wear socks with those sandals, are you?
Keep it in
So,
real, Rufus. Keep it
that's
in
right.
real.
That's right. And so she said, I don't know, because she understands that I'm in some ways I come with theory. She comes with practice. And she said, well,
Yeah.
you know what? That might have worked 10 years ago, but the atmosphere in classrooms now says that would fall flat. And okay, good.
Yeah.
And here's another thing. And hey, and I'll bring in wisdom of the ages and said, listen, I know you think it's that, but you need to consider that. She said, oh, I
Yeah.
hadn't thought about that. And it's been wonderful as we kind of put it together. And you know what? Sometimes I said it before, you live so close to something, you don't appreciate what you got. And then we had some other educators feed into it to make sure that we just didn't fall in love with our own ideas.
Oh,
And
that's
so,
great.
so we felt validated when we came to we didn't want to put a fluff piece out here and have everybody talking at the water cooler about us.
Yeah. Yeah.
We wanted something solid. And they say, you got something good. And then when it hit the streets, people who are seasoned educators, college people, say, listen, this is a good book. I want 5 copies. I remember one person gave me 5 copies because 3 of my kids are in education and I got a sister-in-law, blah, 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 blah. And so we look at one another and say, we did good,
Yeah.
because again, you live so close to it, you take yourself for granted.
Wow, that's awesome. Let me ask you something. You said something earlier about your daughter having, brutally honest. I love the socks and sandals thing. Yeah, that's a no. But I don't care if you live in Florida, Rufus. It's a no. But do you see characteristics of your mom in any of your children?
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. My mother, now my oldest daughter was closer to my mom at the time. We had moved back to Savannah some years ago. And I see more of her, and I mean, physically in her than I do my mom, the way she
Yeah.
does stuff.
Yeah.
I see a professionalism in my daughter that was my mom's.
Yeah.
And everybody called her Miss Steve for short, wherever she was. And she liked to do things nice. Even if she cooked, its presentation mattered.
Yeah. Oh,
So
yeah.
not just put it on the table and eat it. It's got to look nice. And it's the same kind of thing in the classroom. And what probably the closest that my daughter is to my mother. My mother would often bring home underprivileged children. She
Mm.
loved them, and so she'd bring one home for the weekend. If she was teaching out of town, bring them home on the weekend for us. And we loved it when she would bring a little girl. And these 4 boys in the house, and and, and she would take them to the mall, or she'd do something. And our house was a meager little house. I'm telling you, Michelle, but they thought it was a palace.
Oh, God.
Everything's relative.
I was just going to say everything is relative for sure. Yeah.
So when my daughter started teaching earlier, kids would say, her name is Johnson. And so, Miss Johnson, take us to the mall. And so we want to come with you. We want to go with you. And they started sharing with her about intimate stuff. And she said, you know what? I love these kids, but I can't help them now. And that's what prompted her to go back and get her master's in counseling.
Wow.
And so in that regard, she's very much like my mother. It's not just do your thing at school, 3:30, get your
Yeah.
paycheck, get out of it. No, it's I care about these kids. And she's had some rough things that happen to kids at school and kids' parents, and she's had to do the heavy lifting. So she's very much like my mother in that regard.
Yeah. It's kind of sad what we're hearing in the news lately, and it kind of bubbles and then it goes away and it comes back up. What's
Yep.
happening in what we would, for the most part, feel is the safe place to send our children to school. So it's great that she has that nurturing impact and that drive in her,
Oh,
because
absolutely.
it's not easy being a teacher these days, for sure.
Oh my God. I'm one of the few rebels in our family that refused to go into teaching. That was not for me. And I knew that early on. And then since then, I tell everybody I substitute taught after I retired.
Yeah.
And I had second graders that ruined me. They caused me to step away because I can have a classroom of 31 grandchildren, and it was not nightmare. I was so glad to go home that day. I said I should never go back.
My mother was a school teacher for many years, and she taught Spanish in junior high level, and it was introductory Spanish. So first of all, it's an elective that they have to take. They're not interested. She would come home and her eyes would be crossed. My mother would come home at 4:00 in the afternoon. By 6:30, she was out because they'd wear her to the bone, and I could never understand. It's like, what's wrong? What's wrong? It's now I get it.
People say, well, you only work a few months out of the year. Oh, please.
Yeah.
Those 6.5 hours is grueling.
Yeah. Hats off to teachers for sure.
Thank you.
Well, Rufus, this has just been an absolute pleasure. I love your stories about your mom and your children. What is on the horizon for you as we wrap up for 2023? Give me 2 goals that you are passionate about for 2023.
Well, for 2023, I want to, first of all, make sure that we have developed and start to present on our new concept of Leave a Mark, complete the keynote, and develop the workshops that we can provide for school districts across the country as they have their opening sessions.
Yeah.
And they need the emotional lift, but also the practical hands-on workshop of Leave a Mark. We want to have that developed. Actually, we'd like to have that developed by early June, and maybe get a shot or 2 to do it before the year's out. But a lot of them make early decisions, so we'll miss a lot.
Yeah.
But it'll certainly be ready for 2024.
Okay.
And the other thing is to expand my keynoting. I love doing that. I love changing minds, and I want it to be even more national and international. I have, for some reason, it's on my mind, and I'm going to run after it. I don't know why, but things don't come on your mind and stay for no reason.
Yeah, that's right.
Amsterdam is on my mind, and I don't know why. So stay tuned.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, you're manifesting it, and everybody heard it here. So Look out for that. Well, Rufus, thank you so much again for sharing your insight and your fun stories. Loved having you as a guest on the show. Wish you all the best, and good luck with your Leave a Mark workshop and keynotes and all your other successes that are happening. And are you going to be writing another book with your daughter, you said?
Oh, yes. Oh, we are. We don't know yet what it's going to be. We got a concept, but we're still working that out.
All right. Well, great. Good luck to you. And thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I appreciate it.
Thank you again for listening. We'll be back soon with a brand new episode of the Heart Inspired podcast. Until then, I'm your host, Michelle Delgado. I welcome you to support the show by rating us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast. To learn more about HeartMetrics Consulting, book a strategy call by visiting the website at heartmetrics.com.